19,000 homes sit unsold in Miami as condo prices crater and desperate sellers pull listings at record rates. Overnight, Florida's real estate dream has become a disaster, with rents dropping downtown and foreclosure warnings echoing across the state. Governor DeSantis scrambles for answers in an emergency session, but the truth is clear. The collapse isn't just Miami's problem, and it didn't happen by accident. What if the American system itself built a housing market doomed to explode, first here and soon everywhere? The crisis in Florida has already begun. How deep does this go, and who let it happen? Fast forward to April 2025, and Miami's real estate market is suffocating under the weight of 19,319 active listings, a number that haunts every brokerage from Brickell to Aventura. Homes that once vanished in bidding wars now sit untouched for weeks, sometimes months, as sellers slash prices and buyers vanish. This isn't a seasonal pause or a blip on the radar. It's a flood of unsold properties that's tripled Miami's inventory in just 3 years, pushing supply to nearly 10 months, 3 times the national average. Foreclosure filings have started to climb, with county records showing a sharp uptick in default notices across South Florida. Agents report desperate calls from owners who bought at the peak, now staring down the prospect of negative equity as values slide and mortgage payments stay stubbornly high. Downtown, rents have dropped for the first time in years, with landlords offering concessions just to keep units filled. A stunning reversal from the days when tenants lined up for overpriced studios. The delisting ratio, the share of homes quietly yanked from the market before a sale, has set a new national record. In July, for every 59 homes sold, 100 were delisted as owners retreated in panic rather than accept the new reality. Title companies are reporting a surge in distressed sales, and investor forums buzz with stories of deals falling apart at the closing table. These numbers aren't isolated data points. They're the first cracks in a system that was supposed to be bulletproof. The American promise of ever-rising home values, easy money, and endless demand has collided head-on with the hard math of oversupply and eroding confidence. Miami's listing surge isn't just a warning sign for Florida. It's a siren for every city that believed the boom could last forever. Tampa's skyline tells a story just as grim. In 2021, the median condo price sat at $310,000. By spring 2025, that number collapsed to $230,000, a plunge of nearly 25% in less than 4 years. The pain isn't limited to prices. Tampa's condo inventory exploded to nearly 4,000 active listings, up 85% year over year, with brokers there reporting the same sense of paralysis that's gripped Miami. Sellers who once counted on bidding wars now chase buyers with price cuts, incentives, and desperate offers to cover closing costs. The delisting ratio in Tampa has soared, with more condos being yanked off the market unsold than at any point since the Great Recession. Sarasota, long a haven for retirees and second-home buyers, has not escaped the carnage. A typical condo that fetched $600,000 during the pandemic boom is now struggling to sell for $420,000. That's a 30% drop, wiping out years of supposed gains in a matter of months. Open houses draw more curious neighbors than serious buyers, and agents report that price reductions have become routine, not rare. Inventory in Sarasota is stacking up across every neighborhood, from downtown towers to waterfront complexes, as the pool of qualified buyers evaporates. The collapse isn't confined to a single city or coast. From Tampa Bay to Sarasota's beaches, the same pattern repeats: plunging prices, surging listings, and a wave of sellers retreating from the market. These numbers reveal a statewide crisis, not an isolated Miami meltdown. The promise that Florida real estate could defy gravity has unraveled, exposing a system stretched to its breaking point. If these trends continue, no metro in the state is safe from the fallout. Governor Roy DeSantis stepped in front of the cameras in Tallahassee, flanked by state lawmakers and housing officials, as panic swept through Florida's real estate sector. In early 2025, with condo owners on the brink and headlines warning of a financial contagion, DeSantis called an emergency legislative session, his tone shifting from boosterism to damage control. The governor, once quick to tout Florida's economic miracle, now faced a market unraveling on his watch. His agenda was clear: address the condo crisis, restore confidence, and stop the bleeding before it spread to the broader economy. DeSantis opened the session by warning that the collapse threatened not just Miami, but every homeowner and business in the state. He called for rapid action on insurance reform, property tax relief, and new oversight of condo associations, policies aimed at shoring up a system under strain. But behind the rhetoric, frustration simmered. Lawmakers grilled housing regulators about why warning signs were ignored, and condo owners demanded protection from skyrocketing fees and special assessments. The governor's critics seized the spotlight, pointing to years of diverted affordable housing funds and lax oversight as root causes of the meltdown. DeSantis pushed back, blaming federal interest rate hikes and insurance market failures, but the sense of urgency was unmistakable. The state's economic reputation and the political future of its governor now hung in the balance. As the emergency session dragged on, the gap between political promises and the realities facing ordinary Floridians grew harder to ignore. The American system that once fueled Florida's boom had left its leaders scrambling for answers with the whole country watching. Let me take you back to the Miami boom years, because understanding the collapse means seeing just how far reality drifted from the numbers. For nearly a decade and a half, Miami real estate was the ultimate American success story. From 2007 through 2022, home values in Miami-Dade soared by more than 200%, with the steepest climb in the pandemic era. In 2022 alone, the median price for a single-family home jumped 22.2%, outpacing wage growth by a mile and leaving local incomes in the dust. It didn't matter if you were a retiree, a remote tech worker from San Francisco, or a Brazilian investor with a suitcase full of cash, everyone wanted in. By spring 2022, inventory had plunged to just 6,376 available homes, the lowest ever recorded for the region. Listings vanished in days, sometimes hours, as buyers lined up for virtual tours and wired deposits sight unseen. Bidding wars became the rule, not the exception, with properties selling for 10%, 15%, even 20% over asking. The city's price-to-rent ratio blew past historic highs, with investors betting on endless appreciation rather than sustainable rental yields. Miami's price-to-income ratio topped 9, meaning the average family needed 9 years' worth of paychecks just to afford a median home, a level that would have triggered alarm bells anywhere else. Cash was king. In 2022, 43% of Miami home sales closed without a mortgage, and in the luxury segment, that number climbed above 53%. Foreign capital poured in from Latin America, Russia, and Europe, swelling the ranks of all-cash buyers and fueling a speculative frenzy. Developers raced to break ground on new towers in Brickell and Edgewater, convinced that demand would never fade. Even as prices leapt higher, the narrative stayed the same. Florida real estate is bulletproof. But behind the headlines, some voices warned of trouble. Local economists pointed to the widening gap between home values and local wages. One Miami housing expert summed it up: "You can't have prices running this far ahead of incomes and rents forever. Sooner or later, something has to give." The city's fundamentals, income, job growth, rental demand, were left in the dust by a tidal wave of speculation and outside money. For years, it seemed the only direction was EAP. The reality, as we now know, was far more fragile. Speculators and cash buyers didn't just ride Miami's boom, they supercharged it. By 2022, 43% of all home sales in the city closed without a mortgage, far outpacing the national average. In the luxury market, more than half of all deals went to buyers wiring full payment from bank accounts in New York, Sao Paulo, so POW, or Moscow. This flood of liquidity turned Miami into a playground for flippers and short-term rental operators who saw condos not as homes, but as chips in a high-stakes casino. MLS records show that, at the peak, 10 to 15% of all transactions involved flips, properties bought and resold within 12 months, sometimes never even occupied by the owner. Airbnb conversions swept through downtown towers, with investors snapping up entire floors to list as vacation rentals. The promise was simple: buy now, collect easy rental profits, and cash out when prices soar. For a while, it worked. Rental yields hit 8% in 2021, drawing in more capital from out of state and abroad. But as more units hit the market, supply outpaced demand, and nightly rates began to fall. By 2024, short-term rental revenues stagnated, and the same investors who fueled the surge started dumping properties, flooding the resale market with listings they no longer wanted. Traditional safeguards, like mortgage underwriting, local wage checks, and prudent lending, were sidelined by the sheer volume of cash. With so many buyers skipping appraisals and inspections, prices decoupled from reality. One economist at Florida International University put it bluntly: "You do not see crashes in housing when people buy in cash. You see crashes when speculation runs wild and fundamentals are ignored." Miami's market, once propped up by easy money and speculative bets, had become brittle and exposed. When confidence cracked, there was nothing left to cushion the fall except a mountain of unsold condos and a long list of absentee owners looking for the exit. June 24, 2021, Surfside's Champlain Towers South collapsed in the middle of the night, killing 98 people and exposing decades of neglected maintenance across Florida's coastline. In the aftermath, lawmakers rushed through Senate Bill 4D in 2022, followed by Senate Bill 154, rewriting the rules for every condo tower 3 stories or higher. The new laws demand milestone structural inspections and full reserve funding. No more waivers, no more deferrals, no more hiding the true cost of living by the beach. Every building occupied before 1992, or within 3 miles of the coast, and at least 25 years old, faces a December 31, 2025 deadline for their first inspection. If engineers find major issues, the association must fund repairs immediately. There's no voting it down, no kicking the can. For thousands of owners, the first sign of trouble arrived as a letter from their condo board. Special assessments, $40,000, $75,000, sometimes $100,000 per unit, hit mailboxes with a demand for payment in months, not years. One board president in North Miami Beach described the panic in her building. Retirees on fixed incomes, young families already stretched, all suddenly responsible for a 6-figure bill. She faces personal liability if the board misses the inspection or skips reserve payments. "I'm not a developer or a lawyer," she said. "I'm a volunteer, but now I could lose everything if we get this wrong." Insurance only adds to the misery. Median condo premiums have soared above $7,500 a year, triple what they were in 2021. Older waterfront buildings are seeing annual bills of $10,000 or more, sometimes with policies dropped mid-term as insurers flee the state. Owners who bought in for $300,000 now face monthly costs rivaling a luxury rental, with no guarantee their unit will hold value or even remain insurable. This regulatory wave, born from tragedy, was supposed to make buildings safer. Instead, it's crushing affordability and driving out the very people these communities were built for. The American system, built on dreams of homeownership and self-governance, has left ordinary Floridians to shoulder the burden for decades of underfunded promises. As the deadline approaches, the pressure on boards and owners grows, and the fallout is only beginning to ripple through Florida's economy. Across Miami's skyline, cranes have gone silent. Construction sites that once promised new luxury towers now sit idle, their banners faded and sales offices empty. Developers, squeezed by vanishing buyers and ballooning costs, are slamming the brakes on projects mid-build. In the first half of 2025 alone, local records show dozens of high-rise plans shelved or abandoned as pre-sales collapse and lenders pull financing. The ripple spreads fast. Contractors furlough workers, suppliers cancel shipments, and entire blocks of would-be condos become ghostly reminders of the vanished boom. But it's not just local builders feeling the pain. Foreign capital, long the lifeblood of Miami's real estate machine, is flooding out. Bank wires from Sao Paulo and Caracas have slowed to a trickle. Russian syndicates, once flush with cash, are quietly offloading land and units, pulling hundreds of millions in investment out of South Florida. Industry analysts estimate that Miami's foreign cash buyer share has dropped from over 60% at the peak to just 43% this year, a loss of liquidity that's drying up the pipeline for new deals. With capital fleeing and demand in retreat, the supply chain has snapped. The dominoes keep falling, and the shockwaves are only beginning to hit the rest of Florida's economy. Miami's real estate crash isn't just a spreadsheet problem. It's a 5-alarm fire for families and politicians alike. UBS now ranks Miami as the city most at risk for a housing bubble burst, beating out Tokyo and Zurich. With a 9.7-month supply of homes, nearly triple the national average, the market is frozen and the fallout is everywhere. School enrollment in Miami-Dade has dropped by more than 11,000 students since 2021, a direct hit to neighborhoods that once bustled with new arrivals. Middle-class families are packing up, forced out by housing costs that no longer make sense. One Coral Gables family watched their monthly bills jump by over $1,000 in a single year, then faced a $40,000 special assessment on top. They left Florida behind, joining a wave of departures that no politician wants to explain. Governor DeSantis now faces a crisis that's bigger than any single policy fix. The American system, built on cheap money, deregulation, and the promise of endless growth, has delivered a market so unstable that even the most optimistic boosters are running out of excuses. Lawmakers point fingers, but the damage is already done. The question echoing through Tallahassee and beyond: if this is what the American system produces, who's next in line for collapse? In April 2025, Miami's housing market saw over 19,000 active listings, a number not seen in more than a decade. Condo prices fell by as much as 30% in Sarasota and 25% in Tampa, while foreclosure rates climbed and developers halted projects across the state. These events followed years of unchecked speculation, easy cash deals, and regulatory gaps that left the market exposed. New safety laws and insurance hikes, triggered by the Surfside collapse and codified in Senate Bill 4D and Senate Bill 154, pushed many owners past their limits. Yet, the full economic and social costs remain unclear. Key details on emergency policy decisions and the long-term fate of thousands of families are still unfolding. What is clear: Florida's crisis is rooted in deeper flaws of the American housing system, and with Miami now ranked the highest global bubble risk by UBS, the fallout is spreading. For many, the American promise of homeownership is now in question.